A little earlier, I spoke to Dr. Yazen Abdallah. He works with the foreign media for the Syrian Ministry of Information in Damascus. And I started by asking him whether the Syrian government accepts that the chemical attack did take place.
The investigations so far suggest that a chemical attack with the use of gas may well have happened in the Ghouta district outside Damascus. Yet it was the core purpose of the UN commission that arrived to Syria was to establish whether it happened or not. And Syria has highlighted very, very clearly that it accepts the results of the UN investigation, and it would like the results to be interpreted in a way that guarantees objective assessment of the results.
If the UN inspectors do indeed come up with real evidence that it was the government, for example, you would abide by that?
If the UN Commission finds out that the Syrian government was responsible for it, this can only be concluded after a series of a chain of custody of evidence that should be produced not only in a classified manner to certain international players. It should be made a public knowledge, and it should be presented to the UN and the UN Security Council. It should be presented to all the 5 permanent members in the Security Council and interpreted objectively.
Why do you think the West wants to attack, given that their own people don't particularly want to?
The Western people do not really want to attack Syria. The Parliament in the UK demonstrated quite well that the public will in the UK is really against any intervention in Syria, and people are skeptical about it. So if we're now talking about certain administrations, the motives can be discussed, and there's an exhaustive list of why such country, such important geopolitical position in the Middle East, why there is an interest in destabilizing such country, and because of its alliances, and the list doesn't end.
Is the Syrian government resigned to an American attack? Do you expect one now?
No one would know what will happen. The issue, as everybody is watching, is in the hands now of the Congress, and the clear message to them is don't bomb other countries, work with them. And listen to the will of the American people, of people in the West. Look at the elegant example in the UK Parliament, how people's will against wars, people's desire for peace will eventually prevail. All
right, let me accept one of your phrases there. Work with them. You said work with them. Don't bomb them, work with them. How is anybody to work with a Syrian government that has killed tens of thousands of its own people?
The casualties in Syria, of course, they are tragic, and they're now estimated to be in 100,000, but it's not black and white. There are more than half of them are from the Syrian army and from the Syrian security forces. So Syria is facing a proxy war by Wahhabis in the region, mainly by Muslim Brotherhood or Wahhabis and extremists.
The fact remains that the Syrian government has killed tens of thousands of civilians by shelling their villages, by bombing their villages, by bombing their towns, by attacking their people.
The start of the events were violent in Syria, and any country in the world would use the means that it's at its disposal to stop violence, like what happened in Egypt, like the riots that we saw in London, like the army was deployed in Los Angeles, in many other parts of the world. If there is violence against civilians, the government would use measures to stop that. Now, there's no denial that there's a public will towards political change in Syria. That's completely undeniable. I subscribe to that. Many Syrians subscribe to that. However, it doesn't need to be violence. It doesn't need to be powered by the Wahhabis. It doesn't need to be powered by jihadist groups in Syria. Syria, at the start, was very, very open for a political process, and yet until now it's committed to the Ibrahimi mission and to the United Nations and to the United Nations Security Council for a political process embraced by all the international community that opens the door for a new political system in Syria that addresses everybody. Now, if you're talking
a system which would be prepared to live on without an Assad.
if that's the public will, then that's what will have to happen. It has to be agreed upon. It's not about any person in Syria. It is about the Syrian people.
Yazen Abdallah talking to me earlier.